If your shipping company employs 10 qualified drivers, but your fleet only has 4 functioning trucks, you don't possess a luxury operation. You have 6 furious employees collecting idle paychecks in the break room while your company hemorrhages money through pure logistical incompetence. The Houston Astros general manager just signed the receipt for exactly that brand of managerial dysfunction, and the invoice arrived with public humiliation attached. The front office stacked Christian Walker at first base, renewed the covenant with Jose Altuve, imported Carlos Correa to handle third base, and retained Jeremy Pena as the shortstop anchor. The infield filled to absolute capacity, and the talented, capable, completely blameless Isaac Paredes ended up holding the bill for this organizational game of real estate monopoly, standing in a clubhouse with nowhere to play in a market that suddenly refuses to cooperate with Houston's extraction timeline. The franchise desperately needs a left-handed hitting outfielder to balance a lineup constructed with visible positional imbalance, and they attempted to leverage Paredes as a currency to solve that problem. They knocked on the Boston Red Sox's door with what the media described as intense negotiating conversations. Then this week arrived with a different verdict entirely. Boston disconnected the call. The negotiations froze into complete silence, and the entire baseball market turned its back on Houston's asking price simultaneously. Today we're performing a complete autopsy on this marketplace humiliation. We'll expose why Carlos Correa's own public declaration destroyed whatever negotiating leverage the Astros possessed before the conversations even reached productive territory, how baseball's swift justice punishes franchises that compulsively accumulate talent without building positional architecture to deploy it intelligently, and what it truly means to have an Isaac Paredes-caliber player collecting dust in a clubhouse where he has no consistent grass to stand on. Before the mathematics of this extortion attempt to appear on your screen, I'm placing the front office phone directly in your hand. You're making Houston's decisions right now. Do you swallow the organizational pride, call Boston back, and accept selling Isaac Paredes at a price significantly below his legitimate market value just to resolve the outfield vacancy threatening your opening day viability? Or do you lock him on the bench, refuse to be humiliated by rivals leveraging your desperation, and improvise a solution before the season begins without surrendering value? Think with a cold negotiator's discipline, because bluffing with your cards face up on the table is the clearest possible certificate of general manager bankruptcy. Let's reconstruct the scene of this organizational traffic jam with complete honesty. Houston lost a narrative war before the substantive negotiations even began, and the mechanism of that defeat deserves precise examination because it reveals a fundamental error in how this front office manages information flow to the broader marketplace. When you intend to sell a valuable asset, the foundational requirement of effective negotiation is convincing the market that the asset remains genuinely vital to your operation, that you're entertaining discussions from a position of strength rather than desperation, and that walking away from an inadequate offer costs you nothing beyond the inconvenience of continuing to deploy a quality player in his natural position. The entire leverage structure of a trade negotiation rests on the buying team's uncertainty about whether the seller will actually move the player at the proposed price. The Astros dismantled that uncertainty completely through the most self-defeating mechanism available. Their own franchise cornerstone walked a microphone and handed every rival front office the exact information needed to collapse Houston's asking price. Carlos Correa, the player whose arrival created Paredes' positional exile in the first place, stood before the media and delivered the organizational confession that no negotiating team should ever make public. He openly acknowledged that only 4 infield players can take the field simultaneously, making Paredes' surplus status explicit, documented, and permanently attached to every conversation Houston attempts to have with potential trade partners from this moment forward. The damage this statement inflicts on Houston's negotiating position cannot be overstated or repaired through subsequent messaging. Boston's front office, alongside every other organization that received calls about Paredes this winter, now operates with confirmed intelligence that the Astros must move him, not because they want to explore their options or because an irresistible offer appeared unexpectedly, but because the roster construction they chose makes carrying him as a bench piece both financially inefficient and strategically indefensible across a full season. Sellers who must sell receive the price that buyers choose to offer, not the price the asset's actual quality warrants. Isaac Paredes' individual value makes the situation particularly painful to examine from Houston's perspective. This isn't a declining veteran or a player whose performance trends justify the market's skepticism about his worth. Paredes hit with consistent authority last season, demonstrating the kind of disciplined plate approach and power production that organizations spend years developing through their farm systems. His switch-hitting capability adds positional flexibility that should theoretically expand rather than narrow the field of interested suitors. In a different organizational context, one where his roster spot wasn't structurally compromised by the accumulation of infield talent around him, Paredes would represent exactly the kind of cost-controlled, reliable contributor that commands premium return in trade negotiations. The swift justice descending on Houston's front office operates through a mechanism that every organizational accumulation story eventually triggers. When franchises prioritize acquiring individual talent without building a positional ecosystem capable of deploying that talent effectively, the sport extracts payment through the specific embarrassment of watching quality players become leverage problems rather than competitive assets. The Astros looked at Altuve's continued excellence, Correa's availability, Peña's defensive irreplaceability, and Walker's offensive production as individual acquisition successes. The collective consequence of those individual decisions, Paredes standing without a consistent position on a roster that paid significant resources to acquire him, represents the organizational arithmetic that the front office apparently failed to calculate before the moves compounded into the current crisis. Boston's decision to disconnect from these negotiations reveals something important about how the broader market currently perceives Houston's desperation gradient. The Red Sox didn't walk away because Paredes lacks value. They walked away because Houston's leverage collapsed publicly before the conversations reached the stage where Boston needed to make difficult internal decisions about their own prospect capital. When a seller's urgency is confirmed through their own players' press conference statements, buyers exercise patience with complete rationality. Boston can simply wait, allow Houston's options to narrow further as the calendar approaches opening day, and return to the conversation when the asking price reflects the actual negotiating reality rather than the organizational hope that preceded Correa's admission. The positional improvisation challenge Houston now faces compounds daily without resolution. Every week that passes without a Paredes trade brings the regular season closer, with the same structural roster problem unresolved. Deploying him inconsistently as a designated hitter or occasional starter positions where other players have established priority relationships with the coaching staff creates performance uncertainty for a hitter whose production historically correlates with consistent playing time and defined role clarity. Bench players don't maintain the mechanical sharpness that regular at-bat repetition builds, and Paredes' offensive value depreciates in direct proportion to the inconsistency of his deployment. The market that turned its collective back on Houston this week will eventually return, but the terms of that return conversation have fundamentally shifted from what the Astros anticipated when they first floated Paredes' availability. Organizations that were initially interested but unwilling to meet the asking price now understand that time works in their favor. Every rival front office monitoring the situation is calculating precise moment when Houston's opening day urgency transforms their negotiating position from uncomfortable to genuinely desperate, and calibrating their return call accordingly. The negotiating table is frozen, and this organizational disaster just landed directly in your hands. Staring at a roster where a legitimate major league contributor has no consistent position to play in a market that already confirmed it won't pay premium prices for a player whose surplus status is publicly documented. Do you call Boston back immediately, accept a return package that falls below Paredes' actual market value, and solve the outfield vacancy before the season opens without adequate personnel? Or do you hold a line on asking price, risk carrying this dysfunction into the regular season, and hope a different trade partner emerges before the roster imbalance costs Houston games in April? Send your most unfiltered verdict into the comments right now. Bluffing with every card visible on the table is the fastest path to a general manager's resignation letter, and Houston's front office created this crisis through organizational overconfidence that the market just held publicly accountable. And do not step away from this channel for a single second, because while Houston scrambles to resolve this roster traffic jam, a nuclear crisis detonated through the American League overnight that changes everything we thought we understood about one franchise's championship trajectory. Stay locked in. The next video exposes what nobody in the front offices wants publicly confirmed.